The calling of God. If you have been around the church for any length of time at all, I'm sure you have heard lots of folks say, "God called me into the ministry." That is a lie. Although those folks may fervently believe that what they have said is true, it is a lie nonetheless. They may feel called, but I'm not talking about feelings. I'm talking about the supernatural calling of God. God has not called and never will call anyone into the ministry. That is because God only calls people to fill one of the 4 offices of the church. He always has, and He always will. So if one of those whom God actually has called doesn't know which of the 4 offices God called him to fill, I have no doubt he misunderstood his calling. Perhaps you are already aware of the passage where Paul describes the offices God calls men to fill. Ephesians 4:7 through 13. But to each one of us grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore it says, when He ascended on high, He led captive a host of captives, and He gave gifts to men. Now this expression, He ascended, what does it mean except that He also had descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is Himself also He who ascended far above all the heavens, that He might fill all things. And He gave some as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith, and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. That passage rather straightforwardly lists the 4 offices of the church. 1. The apostle. 2. The prophet. 3. The evangelist. And 4. The pastor and teacher. The pastors and teachers designation applies to only one office. Paul added the term pastor to bring the parabolic imagery of the prophets to the mind of the reader. The English term pastor does not even accurately represent the parabolic imagery that stands behind the term. The Greek text literally says shepherds. Paul's point is, the one who occupies the office of the teacher is supposed to impart his knowledge of the teaching to the Lord's flock in order to protect God's sheep from wolves, that is, from false apostles, prophets, and teachers. I could explain the parabolic image of the shepherd in more detail, but that is part of the teaching and is not relevant in this context. The following statements of Jesus and Paul will have to do for now. Matthew 7:15. Beware of the false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Matthew 10:16. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. Luke 10:3. Go your ways, behold, I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. John 10:11 through 12. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hireling and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, beholds the wolf coming, and leaves the sheep, and flees, and the wolf snatches them, and scatters them. Acts 20:29. I know that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. When we talk about God's calling, we are actually talking about the right He has conferred on certain individuals to minister in or for the benefit of His church. Right is just another way of saying authority. So let's talk a bit about the authority attached to each of the 4 offices. Paul has given us a ranking of the authority of the 3 highest offices of the church in the first of his letters to the church at Corinth. 1 Corinthians 12:28. And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, administrations, various kinds of tongues. In that passage, Paul is talking about the fact that in the early church, each office in the church came with a different authority, depending on the message the individual had been called or appointed to preach. However, the unifying purpose that tied all of the offices together was the building up of the body of Christ. Incidentally, in that phrase, the verb build up should be translated as just build. Paul is alluding to the parabolic image of building God's house by fitting together the living stones that Peter mentions in 1 Peter 2:5. But you probably already knew that.